He looked like an ordinary man, quiet, polite, the kind of neighbor who'd wave from his front yard and ask about the weather. He painted watercolors on Sunday afternoons, listened to classical music, spoke softly. But behind that calm smile was a secret that could have started a war. His real name wasn't Emil Goldfuss. It wasn't even the name his friends knew. The man living in Brooklyn, walking the same streets as teachers and shopkeepers and veterans, was a colonel in Soviet intelligence, a ghost, trained in Moscow, loyal to the Kremlin, and for years no one suspected a thing. This is the story of Rudolf Abel, the deepest cover KGB operative ever deployed on American soil. A man who lived next door to families, artists and children, all while gathering the secrets that could tip the balance of the Cold War. This is the story of a spy who became a legend, a man who understood his enemy so well he became invisible. And it begins in the shadow of the atomic bomb. August 1945, the war in Europe is over. The war in the Pacific ends with two flashes of light, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The world has seen what nuclear weapons can do, and now everyone wants them. The alliance between America and the Soviet Union, forged in the fires of World War II, begins to crack. Former allies become rivals. Friends become enemies. The Iron Curtain descends across Europe, and two superpowers stand face to face, each armed with enough firepower to end civilization. But this new war won't be fought with tanks and infantry. It will be fought in the shadows, in whispers, in secrets stolen and lies believed. The CIA is born. The KGB rises from the ashes of the NKVD. Intelligence agencies on both sides recruit thousands of operatives, spies, analysts, codebreakers, assassins. The battlefield moves from the trenches to the briefing room, from the front lines to the suburban street corner. America becomes obsessed with the enemy within. Senator Joseph McCarthy declares that communists have infiltrated the government. Neighbors suspect neighbors, teachers lose their jobs, lives are destroyed by accusations, true or false. Fear spreads like a plague, and in that climate of paranoia, the KGB sees opportunity. Because if America is afraid of spies, it means they're not looking closely enough at the ones already here. The Soviets begin deploying illegals, deep cover agents with false identities, no embassy ties, no protection. Men and women who would live as Americans, think as Americans, disappear into the fabric of daily life. Their mission: gather intelligence on America's most guarded secrets, nuclear research, military strategy, government policy, and one of those men was about to arrive in New York City. His name was William Fisher. But that name would never be spoken in America. Born in England to Russian parents, raised in Moscow, trained by Soviet military intelligence, Fisher was a master of his craft. He spoke fluent English with barely a trace of accent. He understood Western culture. He could blend in. In 1948, he was given a new identity: Emil Robert Goldfuss, a quiet European émigré and amateur photographer. He was instructed to travel to the United States, establish a cover, and become invisible. And that's exactly what he did. Fisher, now Goldfuss, arrived in New York and settled into the rhythm of American life. He rented a studio in Brooklyn Heights, took up painting, joined an art club, made small talk with landlords and postal workers. He was friendly but distant, polite but forgettable. No one remembers the man who never stands out. But beneath the surface, Fisher was running one of the most sophisticated espionage operations on American soil. He had no official connection to the Soviet embassy, no handler checking in on him. He was alone, autonomous, a ghost in plain sight. He communicated with Moscow using methods that seemed impossible. Coded messages hidden in hollowed-out coins, microfilm concealed inside batteries, secret writing in letters that looked like ordinary correspondence, dead drops in public parks where no one would ever notice. He worked slowly, carefully, never rushed, never made mistakes, and for nearly a decade he operated undetected. His mission was to coordinate intelligence from other Soviet agents in America. Scientists, engineers, military personnel who had been recruited or blackmailed into betraying their country. Fisher didn't steal the secrets himself. He was the conductor of an invisible orchestra, ensuring that stolen information made its way back to Moscow. Nuclear secrets, weapons research, strategic military plans, all passing through the hands of a man who spent his weekends painting still lifes and attending gallery openings. Imagine being his neighbor. You'd see him in the hallway of the building on Fulton Street. He'd smile, nod politely, maybe mention he was working on a new painting. He'd invite you to see his studio sometime, cluttered with canvases and brushes, the smell of turpentine in the air. You'd think he was lonely, maybe a little sad, an aging artist trying to make something beautiful in a world that didn't care. You'd never guess he was a trained intelligence officer with a photographic memory and fluency in 5 languages. You'd never imagine that the portable radio on his shelf contained a shortwave transmitter, that the batteries in his drawer concealed microfilm, that the friendly man across the hall was coordinating espionage against your government. That was the genius of Rudolf Abel, the codename Fisher adopted later in his career. He understood that the best disguise wasn't a fake mustache or an elaborate backstory. It was ordinariness, predictability, the quiet life that no one questions. He attended concerts at Carnegie Hall, went to museums, bought groceries at the corner market. He wasn't trying to be noticed, he was trying to disappear. And it worked. For years he moved, through New York like a shadow. He met with contacts in subway stations, passed coded messages in public restrooms, collected intelligence reports hidden in park benches, all while living the life of a man who barely seemed to exist. But espionage is a fragile business, built on trust that can shatter in an instant. And in 1957, that trust began to crack. His name was Reino Heihanen, a Soviet agent, Abel's assistant, a drunk and a liability. Heihanen had been sent to assist Abel in his operations, but he was reckless, careless. He drank too much, spent money too freely, drew attention. Abel reported his concerns to Moscow, but the KGB ignored him. And then, in the spring of 1957, Heihanen was recalled to the Soviet Union. He knew what that meant. When a Soviet agent is recalled unexpectedly, it's rarely good news. Heihanen feared he was going to be executed for his failures. So instead of returning to Moscow, he walked into the American embassy in Paris and defected. He told the CIA everything. He described Abel's operation, the coded messages, the dead drops, the hollow coins used to smuggle microfilm, and he gave them an address in Brooklyn. The FBI moved quickly. Surveillance teams watched Abel's building. Phone lines were tapped. Agents followed him to galleries and parks and post offices, documenting his every move. But they didn't arrest him immediately. They waited, watched, gathered evidence. And then, on the morning of June 21, 1957, they made their move. Abel was staying at the Hotel Latham in Manhattan. Early that morning, FBI agents knocked on his door. They identified themselves, told him he was being detained for investigation. Abel didn't resist, didn't raise his voice. He simply nodded and asked if he could get dressed. Inside the room, agents found what they were looking for: shortwave radios, cipher pads, microfilm, hollowed-out coins containing secret messages. And when they pressed him for his real identity, Abel gave them nothing. He remained silent, calm, professional. Because even in defeat, a good spy never breaks. The arrest of Rudolf Abel made headlines across America. Soviet spy ring uncovered in New York. KGB colonel lived among us for years. The media frenzy was immediate. Photographs of Abel, stoic, composed, unshaken, appeared on front pages everywhere. The public was both horrified and fascinated. How had this man lived among them for so long? What secrets had he stolen? But the legal question was more complicated. Abel was a foreign agent captured on American soil. He wasn't an American citizen accused of treason. He was an enemy combatant in an undeclared war. The government wanted him prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, but someone had to defend him, and no one wanted the job. No one except James B. Donovan. Donovan was an insurance lawyer, a family man, a patriot who had served in the Office of Strategic Services during World War II. When he was asked to defend Abel, he didn't hesitate, not because he sympathized with the Soviet Union, but because he believed in the Constitution. He believed that even an enemy spy deserved a fair trial, that the strength of American justice lay in its willingness to defend the indefensible. In court, Donovan argued passionately. He didn't deny Abel's guilt. The evidence was overwhelming. But he argued that executing Abel would serve no purpose, that keeping him alive might one day prove valuable if an American agent needed to be exchanged. It was a long shot, a gamble. But the judge listened. In November 1957, Rudolf Abel was convicted of espionage and conspiracy. He was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. Not death. 30 years. Donovan's argument had worked. Abel would live, and history would prove Donovan right. February 10, 1962. A frozen morning in Berlin. The sky is grey, the air is bitter cold. On the Glienicke Bridge, a narrow span of steel and stone connecting West Berlin to Potsdam in East Germany, two men prepare to cross. On one side stands Rudolf Abel, escorted by American officials. On the other, Francis Gary Powers, the American U-2 pilot shot down over Soviet airspace 2 years earlier. The world is watching. This is the first major spy exchange of the Cold War, a symbolic moment when two superpowers acknowledge the shadow war they've been fighting in secret. The exchange is choreographed down to the second. Both sides have agreed to the terms: no weapons, no tricks, a clean swap. At exactly 8 in the morning, the two men begin walking toward each other. Abel moves slowly, his face expressionless. Powers walks faster, eager to reach the west. They pass each other at the center of the bridge. Neither speaks, neither looks back. And just like that, it's over. Abel returns to Moscow. Powers returns to America. Two men, two nations, two sides of the same war. James Donovan, who negotiated the exchange on behalf of the American government, stands on the bridge watching Abel disappear into the east. He wonders if Abel will be welcomed home as a hero or punished for his capture. He'll never know, because in the Soviet Union, spies don't get parades, they get silence. Rudolf Abel returned to Moscow in 1962 and vanished from public view. The KGB gave him a quiet pension, a modest apartment, a medal he could never wear in public. He resumed teaching at the Intelligence Academy, training a new generation of operatives in the art of deep cover. He painted, listened to music, lived quietly. He never spoke publicly about his years in America. In 1971, Rudolf Abel died in Moscow. His death was not announced. His funeral was private. Even in death, he remained a secret. But in the West, his story lived on. James Donovan became a national figure. He went on to negotiate the release of prisoners after the Bay of Pigs invasion. He was celebrated as a man of principle, a lawyer who defended the unpopular because he believed in justice. Donovan and Abel had developed an unusual respect for each other during the trial. They were enemies, yes, but they were also professionals who understood the rules of the game. Years later, Donovan would say that Abel was one of the most intelligent men he'd ever met. And he believed Abel had shown more honor than many of the politicians who condemned him. Because honor among spies is a strange thing. It exists in the spaces between loyalty and betrayal, between duty and doubt. Abel never betrayed his country, he never gave up a single name. Even when facing execution, he remained silent. And in his silence, he earned the respect of his captors. Rudolf Abel lived among his enemies for nearly a decade. He walked the same streets, breathed the same air, shared the same subway cars with the people whose government he was sworn to deceive. And yet he was invisible, not because he was a master of disguise, but because he understood something fundamental about human nature. We don't see what we're not looking for. Abel knew that if he lived quietly, kept his head down, and never broke character, he could hide in plain sight. He knew that the best lies are the ones we tell ourselves, that our neighbors are who they say they are, that the man next door is just a man. But he was more than that. He was a soldier in a war that had no front lines. A war fought not with bullets, but with secrets. A war where victory was measured not in territory gained, but in information stolen. And for a time, he won. The Cold War is over now. The Soviet Union has collapsed. The KGB has been dissolved. But the world Rudolf Abel lived in, the world of shadows and secrets and invisible wars, never really ended. It just changed shape. Today, spies still walk among us. They use different tools, different methods. But the mission is the same: to see without being seen, to know without being known, to be a ghost in plain sight. Rudolf Abel understood that better than anyone. He was a man with no real name, no real past, no real future beyond the mission. And when his mission ended, he disappeared as quietly as he had arrived. A ghost, a legend, a spy who lived next door. If stories like this move you, if you believe that history's greatest lessons are found in the lives of those who lived it, then subscribe to Battle Echoes. Because the past is never truly silent, and the voices of history are still speaking. We just have to listen.